o'clock. So I'm going to call to order the second monthly meeting of the Hendersonville City Council, July 28th, 2023. We do have our agenda in front of us. Is there anything anyone would like to have changed on the agenda? Not?
I also want to change it, but I need to ask I just came from the Parks Master Plan meeting, and I need to ask the council a question before we begin. We don't really have like, does anybody like an E there, but I just like to ask that.
Well, let's add an E.
Okay.
All right.
Mary's question.
Sure, Jerry's question.
All right. Anything else? Not? Motion to approve?
Madam Mayor, I move the City Council approve the agenda as amended.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Not. Those in favor of approving the agenda as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it. We have our agenda. Consent agenda, 2 items. Either of those you would like to have moved to the regular agenda so it can be discussed, or if not, a motion to approve.
Madam Mayor, I move that City Council approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there any discussion? Not. Those in favor of the consent agenda say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Ayes have it, and we are set with that. Presentations. All right, downtown parking we'll start with. Mr. Pauly's going to do that.
Yes. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. We are officially past our 3-month period and almost through a 4th month of our parking system changes that were implemented March 1st. So we felt it a good time to come in and update you on the system and what we're seeing around town and what we're hearing. The goal today is to walk away with some general direction from City Council on some solutions we think that might help the user experience downtown. All right, just to quickly review some of the goals of the program, really at a high level, what we've been talking about for a long time here. The goal was to create parking availability, right? So to create an available and convenient parking situation for downtown Hendersonville. Part of that was moving employees off Main Street. We also wanted to create an easy-to-use system with different options for payment, from cash to card to phone to permit. We wanted to create more permit availability, and we wanted to maintain an active business district. So of those, I think 3 we've done really, really well out of the gate. We're really working through the technical bugs and the use of the system, and I guess the jury's out on how, if the Main Street's an active business district. There are varying opinions across town of what that means. So just to review some facts out of the gate. We didn't put June in here because we don't have the full month yet, so the calculations would be off. But ultimately what you can see on this table are the months across the top. So July through June, that's our fiscal year. And you see data populated for March, April, and May. The very top item is historical occupancy for our surface lots. So we were able to calculate that because we did have revenue. Those were metered lots. We were able to figure out occupancy numbers for those lots. We used our most recent 2 years, which were our strongest parking years to date. And the occupancy, you could see on average, was 25% occupied. That's all billable hours for those lots. So no parking system is 100% occupied, essentially. So what you see here is March was about 22% historically. May and April were 28%, with our peak month being October at 36% occupied. Again, that's the past 2 fiscal years in our surface lots. And one thing to take as a grain of salt with this is Dogwood was part of that surface lot inventory. We've taken Dogwood kind of out of that inventory now. So that's one thing to keep in mind, right? So Dogwood was part of the previous occupancy numbers. Now we're just looking at azalea and maple. And we've added spruce, so spruce is part of that as well. So what we're seeing from the lots, Main Street and the avenues, and the parking deck is actual occupancy of about 27% in March, 28% in April, and 32% in May. So a small uptick, which we're happy to see, and even happier to see that this is meeting our revenue projections for the year just barely. So we were aiming for about $750,000 in revenue from the meters. And if you look at that on-street payment and the lot and parking deck payment, it's going to land us, extrapolated out, about $755,000 at the current pace. So we're like right on pace to make the revenue model currently. A couple other things just want to hit on. We did have a good kind of experiment with Garden Jubilee with the deck. We staffed that and just attempted to see how it was going to work. The deck didn't work how we expected it at first, but we got that technical error corrected, and then it corrected itself and was running itself much better. But right when the peak of it, when John came to volunteer, it kind of broke on us, so that was fun to watch him deal with that. But it was full, so the deck was completely full at one point during the day. It really should have been holding back spaces for permit holders, and that's where we ran into an issue. So we're going to learn from that and come back with some different approaches for Apple Festival. But I think it's going to be a great asset for us. It's going to have a lot of parking availability for people coming downtown using our main street. And lastly, I just want to point out the revenue potential per space at the current rates. So this is saying each space that we bill for is occupied 100% of the billable hours. So each space in the lots is worth $3,000. Each space on Main Street and the Avenue is worth $6,000. Each space in the deck is worth $3,650. Just to look at citations, because it's another part of the parking program, the goal of this is education, not revenue generation. To date, we've had a total of 2,917 citations, on average 729 per month. Of those, about 90% are warnings. So we are only actually writing about 70 tickets per month of actual citations that someone would have to pay. And you can also see we have the appeals, and you can see the number of appeals approved and rejected by month. And this generates about $3,000 in revenue per month at a 64% collection rate. Collection for parking tickets is pretty difficult, but we are getting better with our new ordinances. We have more teeth that we will start bringing that money in.
And you mentioned this on Monday. That money is not part of the budget. Like, in other words, whatever that is.
It's part of the budget, but it's a small part of the budget.
We're not counting on that to meet our revenue.
Correct. We're not.
Yes.
We count that we're going to generate some small amount every year, but it's not the bread and butter of what generates revenue for us. So what we're hearing, we have been out in the community. Thanks, Jamie, Lou, John, everyone here. I know you all have been out in the community and hearing from the community. We have been out there talking with people and listening, and we also have had a couple different meetings. So the Downtown Advisory Committee had a public input meeting 2 weeks ago on June 13th. There was about 25 business owners in this room, along with the committee members, and we went for about 2.5 hours and really just kind of open discussion. Let it all out there. Let's hear what's going on. We also had a meeting Monday with the Downtown Advisory Committee to continue that conversation with the committee to provide guidance on kind of what we're hearing and what the solutions we're proposing. So just want to make sure that it's heard, right? So I wanted to document this and make sure we go through it. We're hearing a variety of things, right? So we're hearing business is hurting. We're also hearing at the same time some people are attributing it to other economic factors related to interest rates in the national economy, and that other community businesses might be down outside of Hendersonville that aren't a parking meter type area. So there's a back and forth with that, but I think ultimately there is still some pain points with the meters that are affecting business owners, especially with a certain crowd that might be coming at a certain time of day, and they just don't want to put up with the technology. I think to sum it up best, Barbara Hughes submitted a public comment that was really, it's about the feeling of Main Street and trying to maintain that. So that's really where our focus is when we talk about solutions, is user experience. Most agree employees should be off Main Street. We heard that. Some disagree. The first hour free, the grace period for 30 minutes or the first hour is confusing. We hear that quite a lot. For customers, it's a feeling, right? They don't feel that leisurely feel on Main Street. Really, we're working the balance because we hear the opposite. We hear from some business owners, we love turnover. Our business used to never get these types of people coming in. They would not come downtown to my business. Now they're able to come in under 30 minutes and out and sign some paperwork for real estate or something like that. So there's a balance between turnover and leisurely stroll. I do think with appropriate action, we can encourage that leisurely feel utilizing the parking deck or free parking that's just adjacent to the district. We've heard we need to make payment easier. Ideas have been floated from volunteer ambassadors to some store owners kind of adopt a kiosk mindset where they go out and help people with the kiosks that are out in front of their store. We've heard about the competition with mall and online shopping. We've heard it's hurting the first dinner seating, so we've heard some about enforcement hours being to 7. That's hurting our first seating. We've also heard other dinner numbers are up, so it's kind of a mixed bag there. Hurting breakfast. Breakfast is the first thing people cut. We kind of heard from, well, occupancy's down at the TDA. We're getting less people here, and their wallets are tighter. They're cutting breakfast out of their trips, things like that. Heard it's a lot at once, right? We put these meters in, and we're kind of in a slow economy. We heard it needs to be a more age-friendly system. We've heard some businesses will go under. We've heard safety for employees is a high concern, and really the technical errors, I think, is really what's catching everybody, right, with the technology. It's difficult for some, for Park Mobile and the kiosks and things like that. So that's everything we heard. And our goal was to say, okay, let's take this in and let's come back with some solutions. Also, additionally, we met with the Chamber of Commerce, their policy committee, and a local business owner there, and talked through some of these solutions as well. So we've tried to get out there and talk with everybody. So we'll come back and spend some time on this is what I would prefer, but I'll run through what Downtown Advisory Committee recommended, and then come back to the slide and kind of turn it over to you all and hear what your thoughts are. So some potential short-term, we've got short-term options and long-term options. So short-term, we think we can execute these within 3 months. Most likely we can knock these out by your August meeting and have some ordinance changes before you to implement. Long-term is really greater than 1 year. These are more financially risky decision-making where this has the potential to impact the revenues we're bringing in to pay for the enterprise fund. So these decisions are going to be more of, are we okay not meeting the commitment? And if we're not okay meeting the commitment, how are we going to fill that gap? Main Street, service district tax, property tax, some other form that we'll talk about tonight to meet that financial commitment. So the first one is remove the 30-minute zone. So these parallel spaces along Main Street, we kept them. We thought Downtown Advisory wanted those in there, and we'll talk about the recommendation in a second, but removing those parallel zones is 30 minutes and making them all 5 hours. So it's all the same. You don't have any confusion between if you're in a parallel spot or an angle spot, it's the same parking rules. So those have caused a lot of confusion. We've had people getting tickets in the 30-minute zones. We've heard to make ADA spaces free. There's 12 ADA spaces on Main Street, so this is not necessarily a major financial consideration. This is really a decision of, do we want to allow someone to park there all day versus creating turnover in those spaces? And that's one option we think is very simple. If we want to make ADA free, we can do that, but that's really the balance you're striking there. Citation rates are high. We have a recommendation to lower citation rates. They're at $50 now. We would lower them to $25. More signage and kiosks. We're going to work through this on a case-by-case basis. We've heard from a lot of specific business owners, and even I've spoken with Barbara on the street. I'm like, well, I mean, because I was like, we could put a lot more out here, but it's going to clutter things. And she was like, I don't want that. And I was like, exactly. So we're going to work one-on-one, figure out where the bad spots are, and try to improve that. Aggressive marketing campaign, we've heard, really interested if you all are open to pursuing that, and just helping people understand where free parking is, how comparable it is to just going to Target or a super center and realizing it's the same distance to walk if you were just one block off Main Street, things like that, and how to pay, the different options. Parking validation setup, I think Jamie is very close to having that squared away, and we're going to do some test cases with some business owners downtown. Expanding the counts on the permits, so this would be going from each permit that you buy, you get 2 spaces. So this would essentially increase it, not 2 spaces, 2 plates. You can't both be down there at the same time. But what we're hearing is like one business may have 3 employees, only 3 employees that switch off each day of the week, and they'd really like to just buy 1 permit and have 3 plates on it. So we're open to expanding the permit count. We don't think that would be a tremendous problem for us, and it might help the business owners. So that's something we put out there. And lastly, probably the highest interest item was pay by increment, right? So back it off from hours to 30 minutes or 15 minutes. And we'll talk about how the downtown advisory voted on that on the next slide. The long term are, modifying enforcement hours, peeling back from 7 to 6 or to 5, we've even heard. Again, these come with financial risk. Creating a resident permit. So I ran the numbers actually of what this would cost, because there was a lot of talk in the room. Well, a resident should be able to buy a permit for $100 a year and come downtown and park wherever they want. Well, that doesn't work with our $25 a month to park in Dogwood, nor does it work with the value we need returned from each space on Main Street. So each space on Main Street, if you remember, is like $6,000 full occupancy. To meet our model, we need to sell at least 36% of that for Main Street. So that's about $180 per month for a Main Street permit. Now we can open those up. It creates a tremendous ease of use discussion, but it's not an easy financial decision, I don't think. So we can open those and see how that does, but I don't think you're gonna see as a ton of people buying them. I could be wrong. Having a rate differential on avenues, there's some, I think that creates additional confusion from user perspective, because they're all the same zone right now. This would create new zones and add to some confusion, I think. But lowering the rates, again, this is gonna have a financial impact, or make avenues free, another pretty significant financial impact. Lowering the rates, obviously we would love to do that, but it'd be great to get through the year and be in a better spot to say, yes, we're good to lower rates, rather than let's lower rates now and then come back and say, oh, sorry, we gotta raise them back up. And then south end permits, we know is an interest point. This is one of those ones that's a trade-off, right? If we do better than expected, what do you do with that extra money? Do you put it into more parking resources, or do you put it into one of these lowering options? So those will come back to you in a year. If you want to talk about them tonight, more than happy to. So let's dive into what downtown said. So they were unanimous on removing the 30-minute zone spaces, so make everything the same. They were 8-2 on keeping paid ADA spaces. They were lower to $25 for citation, was unanimous. They said, yeah, come by, let's do a case-by-case look at the signage. They said to pursue the marketing campaign. They said to pursue the validation. Those were all kind of easy button ones. They said pursue expanding the count to 3 or 4 permits per permit holder. And they were split on the increments, 5 votes for 15 minutes and 5 votes for 30 minutes. 100% said we should go to a smaller increment, but they were split on what the minutes should be. So we've got some next steps, but I want to pause here and just answer any questions or seek any initial direction that y'all feel related to what the Downtown Advisory has recommended.
I think we should, you're asking. You seem to imply Monday night that whether it was 3 or 4 probably wouldn't make a difference, because they have to police it themselves.
They have to manage it themselves, that's correct.
So I'm okay with 4, just because it gives them more flexibility. Once again, they have to manage it. And I like the 15-minute intervals rather than 30. I just think that people can understand that they can understand both of them, but I like the 15-minute one.
Okay.
Because I was at the meeting, and I ran out of, and I'm like, I'm not staying for another hour, but I had to pay for another hour, and I was parked right out front on the street. So it would have been nice to have another 15-minute option there.
I would agree with the 15 minutes. I like that increment better. And also, I think people are accustomed to it when they're using the park mobile system in other cities. Expanding the count on the permit, that's fine. I agree with pretty much everything up here, except I'm gonna be really honest, I don't know if I agree with lowering the citation rates, because we had such a huge issue with people abusing that system before, and I don't understand making it easier or cheaper for people to not follow the rules.
So part of the discussion was the first, well, really it's their second citation. It's not as impactful, right? It's $25, but we still have the elevated escalation, right? So if you're not paying, you're going to get up to $100 outstanding. And then if you're a habitual, so that's your fourth unpaid parking ticket, you will be towed. So that's where we catch the true habitual violators without, some of the comments we get is I was just up for the day from the Cliffs and I didn't realize ADA had parking and I don't want to pay this ticket type thing.
Does habitual mean you get it and you don't pay, or you keep getting them?
I think it's not unpaid, correct? Or is it?
Keep doing
I
it.
can't remember
I thought
honestly.
it was you keep getting
Yeah,
it.
keep getting it.
3 unpaid or six total? Okay.
6 paid means you're habitual.
Right, you're still habitual at that point, even if you're paying.
I think if we keep the escalation, then that's fine. I could go down to the other one, but it seems silly to make it easier for people to break the rules.
I agree with the 15-minute increase. And on that AD space free, did we not talk about after a period of time that it'll be a charge?
They talked about tiering it,
Karen?
but ultimately it was, if they were to go to somewhere in the middle, they wanted to go land at like, you get 3 hours free at the ADA space, and then you have to start paying, at a higher rate the further you stay.
And the challenge with that is you still have to put it in the system.
You still have to, yeah,
To know
so,
when you're 3
and
hours.
that's where they landed.
It doesn't
at,
make
like,
that go
just
away.
Exactly, yeah. It didn't solve a lot of the user issues that we were running into.
Yeah, I think related to that is, what if the ADA spaces are filled, but you have a valid handicapped tag? Does that mean you can park wherever you want and still get the free or whatever? I think it gets too confusing if you have different rules.
Okay.
So when you were going down the left side of potential options, in my head, everything that the Downtown Advisory Council recommended, I agree with. So I think those are very reasonable.
Where are you on the increment? Are you
Sorry?
15? Where are you on the increment?
I'm indifferent on
Okay.
it, to be honest, but I am. If
Yeah.
more people choose 15, I'm fine with that, to be honest. But
Thank you.
and the 3 or 4 thing, I'm also
Indifferent as well.
on.
I have a question, Brian. This is, we sort of discussed on Monday, but not really part of the options, but we talked about how the 30-minute grace period or the hour grace period is confusing to some people.
That's correct.
As far as how it's applied. Whether or not we correct that in this round of this, it does seem to me that we need to find some way that it's supposed to appear to be free, and then you start paying. I mean,
Right.
that's what I think of, but it's really not free. It's like, if you can get out here in 30 minutes, it's free, but the moment you stayed a minute 31, bang, you're paying for that 30 minutes that you were staying. And I don't know where we go to correct, I don't know if correct's the right term, but
Yeah.
we should not, it sounds like it's free, but it's really not.
Find a way to word that better and
Yeah.
market it better, yeah. And what you're alluding to, I think, as well, was what we heard from the policy committee at the chamber was get rid of that, just do away with it altogether, make it all charged, and use that money to do one of the long-term options. However, in the DAC room, that was less attractive.
Right.
Why was that? What was the reasoning?
I think some of the quick turn businesses really like that because they've explained it to their customers. If you know how it works, it's very simple to run into the parking deck, pick up lunch to go, hit Just Ducky or whatever, and then get out for free. Those are the people who figured it out. They like that easy business.
I mean, I think we can make that a part of the marketing, because I think doing more marketing around how there is still free parking, because all of the times it's talked about in the media, no one ever still mentions that there's still free parking. And then I think you could just say up to 30 minutes or up
Right.
to 1 hour. Then I
think that's the way the
make more
ordinance is
sense.
written, right? But yeah,
And we did spend
yeah.
a lot of time trying to come up with that language, because it used to say first hour free. No,
Yeah.
it's
Up
less,
to, yeah.
less than an hour free.
Right.
And so all of our stuff does say that already.
And really,
Maps.
when you're operating the kiosk or Park Mobile, when you click it, it will say, you have to say how long you're staying, right?
Yeah.
So you say 30 minutes, it says you're free. If you say 1 hour, it says it's $2. So it's not like it's bait and switching you at all, because most people aren't, if you stay 30 minutes and then you stay 2 minutes over, you're getting a ticket. You're not paying $2.
I think the perception though is if I get 30 minutes free,
Yeah,
then
it
my
should be
hours start
discounted,
at 31 minutes is my first hour starting.
Right, that's
there.
what people are
Really,
thinking.
you're paying for 30 more minutes, not a whole
Yeah.
hour.
Even
But
though
I
the
like the
system's
term-
saying it's $2 for that, yeah.
I like the term grace period.
Yep,
That has a better ring to what it really is.
yeah.
And I would assume that with the 15-minute increments, that, that is going to be,
That's gonna help that a lot.
that'd be much,
Yeah, I think it's gonna.
that'd be a much better benefit. I mean, because really, then you start paying for 15, 30, 45, and that was,
Yeah,
Oh, that's right. Well, that will change that, right?
that's right, you'd pay $1. We still would set like the minimum stay, I think at 30 minutes, just to keep our ordinance in set with our grace periods. But after that, it would be 15-minute increments.
Yeah, that would fix that problem.
This would help.
Yeah.
There's probably still some confusion around it, but it would help.
And I know we're not gonna talk about the long-term ones, but I'll just beat the whole like resident pass thing again, because I think we need that.
What do you think about what I said about a resident permit at $180 per month?
I think I would rather see it be like a prepaid hourly rate. Like, I don't even know how we would do that, because I don't know how Park Mobile works.
Yeah.
But,
That's where the license plate permits, like that's the
the
easiest.
permit is easier to institute.
Lowest hanging fruit, yeah.
As a resident, $180 a month is like way above what I would be willing to pay. But if you were to say, you can get parking on Main Street for $1.50 an hour, or parking at the garage for $1 an hour, you just have to prepay this card or whatever, that I'd be all over.
Okay. We'll look into that one,
I mean, that's why it's a
Yeah.
longer term thing, but
right?
And then I'll admit on the long-term one, the discussion we had about the impact on the evening dinner crowd. Certainly, I know that they had decided that we needed to wait later on, but that did sound like a real concern as far as how it's
Yeah.
changing eating on Main Street.
And what we're gonna do is we have every hour, we have a lot of data in the system. It's just gonna take time to really dive into it. We'll be able to give you the number of what the revenue loss is if you take it to 6 versus what you take it to 5, those types of decisions, and have some really good conversation once we see.
It's interesting though, too, because some restaurant owners have reported exceptionally higher
Yeah.
sales than previous years. So it's like,
It's a big
okay,
mixed
well,
bag.
it's not affecting their parking.
I
you
don't
know,
think
and-
it's all parking. I mean, for some, I think it could be, but like I was in 2 different downtown restaurants within the span of a week of each other at 5:30, and they were all pretty poppin'. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the easiest thing to point at, right?
Lindsay, where you
I mean,
going
it's
with
right
this
outside your door.
oh, it's
You're
5
in your
o'clock.
30s
It's
now.
always 5 o'clock somewhere.
Well, Johnny Depp says isn't happy hour anytime.
So I'm hearing DAC recommendations are good, 15 minutes, and look at 4 potential plates per permit.
And then also, when parking validation is up and running, I would like to know that. So, because I think that would help some of the business owners to deal with the problem, say, I will validate your parking if they want to do that. It's passing along a cost, I recognize that, but I do think that will help when we know that is working, we can mention that to people, like, did you know you can validate their parking?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's next? So we're going to continue to focus on the user experience, keep listening and talking to folks, and make sure they're heard. We'll adjust where we can. We're going to keep balancing the priorities, right? Because almost all these decisions are cutting against something else, so we just have to continue to communicate that. I think it'd be really important that we look into an occupancy study heading into our peak time in the fall, and compare that to our 2016 Dixon study that was looking at like every single space with cameras. I'm basing mine off just data and revenue and number of spaces. This would be, they're out there physically looking at it and giving us like real time by hour, 11 to 1 p.m. Is Main Street at 104% occupied like it was in 2016? Or is it 96 where that sweet spot is that we're trying to get to? So I think that's very important. that we look into that, and then they would also do something along the lines of a private lot study and potential impacts of what's going on elsewhere in the community. Again, we're just creating a proactive approach to available parking resources for our growing community, and I think we've gotten our direction tonight. So with that, I'll take any additional questions, or otherwise I'm done.
Questions, comments? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay. Next, proposed regulations related to predatory towing and wheel locks.
Good afternoon. Here we are talking about parking again. I think parking has been one of the most challenging things that I've dealt with in my career. And I think I could probably get a hearty amen from everybody up there too. So today, I haven't called it predatory towing. I've called it regulation of involuntary towing in commercial parking lots in the city of Hendersonville. So when we talk about this, I guess I'm doing my slides. I don't do this very often, you can tell. So what are we trying to accomplish here? So I took a stab at this based on what I've seen in other ordinances. Daniel and I have talked about it. Daniel's been very instrumental in putting all this together. But what are we trying to accomplish here? We're trying to protect the consumer as well as balance private property rights, right? And so one of the goals of we have a draft ordinance. It's still a little bit of a work in process. That's why I didn't provide it. But transparency and notice to people parking. In other words, people need to know what the rules are. If they're going to pull in your parking lot and you're charging for parking or you're not allowing people to park, they need to know that and be put on notice of that. Makes you feel a little bit less sorry for them, I guess, if they pull in there and get towed if the rules were clearly posted. Next is preservation of the public peace, because non-consensual towing can lead to breaches of the peace between the tower and the parker, right? We want to avoid confusion to the public with the city parking facilities, practices, and enforcement. Non-consensual towing can lead to people being deprived of their primary means of transportation. They need to be able to get their cars back reasonably if towed. And then, as I said, we're talking about protection of property rights, both your personal property rights as a car owner and the real property owner's rights as well. Y'all can stop me at any time if you have questions. So, to jump right in, this is based on, there was a Court of Appeals case that talked about what we can and cannot regulate. Chapel Hill has an ordinance, Town of Cary has an ordinance. Both have been looked at by the Court of Appeals, and so it's based on what the Court of Appeals has said we can and cannot do. So getting to that, protecting of the public, having notice, transparency, we thought about it and we thought, well, why don't we have a registration requirement? It says get a permit, but it's really a registration requirement for towers. What are just some basic things that all towers need to have in order to be able to do towing in the city? The first seems obvious, but you'd be surprised that they must be authorized to do business in the state of North Carolina. That means if they're a corporation, they've got to be in good standing with the Secretary of State. They've got to have a liability policy in place and provide a copy of that to the police department, and they've got to keep that current. And then they, to the transparency part, have to provide information to be kept on file. The name, address, phone number of the business and managing personnel, the address where towed vehicles are stored, the make, model, and tag number for the tow trucks, such that use of an unregistered tow truck would be in violation of the ordinance, and they must file their fee schedule. Again, to promote transparency to the public so that if people need information, we have that on file and we're not at a loss when we get these phone calls. Yes, ma'am.
Are there limitations to how often they can alter their fee schedules? I've been in cities and heard of other cities where there's predatory towing, and they will change their fee schedules if there are events or special events. And because there are ordinances that have been in place for those cities, and they know that they have to post it, but then they'll just change it back. So I'm just wondering if that's a thing, or
So we cannot regulate what they charge. So I don't think we could regulate telling them they can't raise their fee for an event. However, what we can say is it's got to be updated and posted at least 24 hours before the changes would go into effect so that people would know. They couldn't just the morning of decide, oh, we're going to up our fees.
No, but they could do it the day before at 7 and then start.
24
doing it
hours.
for a
Could we
special
make
event.
that higher than 24?
We could, sure could.
I don't know if that would change anything, to be honest, though, because if they were a savvy business person and they knew that the Apple Festival was coming,
I mean, that's true.
in 90 days, they would change that fee schedule. You know what I mean? Like to reflect.
Or they could just say, my fee schedule is the months of January through this, it's this, the months of this and this, it's that. So, you know, if you want to get into that type of consumer and price gouging and things like that, that's really not something that we can regulate. Although there's a set of statutes called the Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practices Act that is enforced by the Attorney General's office. And so if we feel like that's occurring, they would come in and do an investigation and could cite people or take people to court or whatever. So that would be kind of
Do we think
out of our
that's
hands.
happening much here in Hendersonville?
Well, I think this came up because of some complaints of some practices
No, I'm
for
talking about the
like,
fee schedule changing part.
I don't know.
Okay.
I haven't heard of that
have not heard that
particular
either.
thing,
Okay.
but I'm not I mean, obviously, Councilmember Hensley talked to somebody who has experienced that or is aware of that, so I have not heard that. And to be honest, this is still relatively new with in the city of Hendersonville, because with what we've done, then people are parking, it's kind of pushed people to park in business owners' parking lots. And so the business owners say, well, hey, we can make some money at this too. And so it's increased, it's become more of a business. The towing thing has become even more, because I understand that the towers are like camping out in the parking lots and meeting people that hadn't paid as they get to their car and saying, pay me or else I'm going to tow you, those kinds of things. And so that's really, so this has evolved as these ladies here tell me of the emails they get and the complaints they get. This has evolved over, in fact, very recently over what it was when we originally started talking about this. So,
Can I ask a question?
yes,
That discussion was about the towing companies.
it was.
I'm assuming there are rules with regard to notice you have to provide if you are going to tow people.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. And so what we're talking about now, and I should have read the title, is no matter where you're towing from, these rules apply. Okay? Then we'll get to towing from private property lots and from private property. But this is just, even if our police department called them to tow somebody, they've got to have all this in place. Uh-oh. Whoops. How do I go backwards?
Where's the teenager? We need a teenager.
The bottom one? Okay. All right, so this is regardless of where you're towing from. This is the second slide on that. So they've got to accept, we can tell them that they have to accept different methods of payment. And that was one of the issues in that Chapel Hill case, because you got to give us cash, right? You got to give us cash. Or if you'll pay by cash, I'll charge you this, or you pay by credit card, I'll charge you this. Anyway, so it says that they've got to accept by cash and at least 2 other nationally recognized credit cards, because again, the goal is to allow people to get their vehicle back reasonably, right? And not have it held hostage because they don't have however much money in cash. They have to tow it to a storage facility not more than 15 driving miles from the tow. They have to report it to the police department before they leave the property that it's being towed. And they have to say the vehicle that's being towed, where it's being towed to. Now, that's a state law already. It's not just in the proposed ordinance. That's supposed to be happening already. I've also heard, since we started talking about this, that the private lots are going to start booting. And so, again, like I said, it's evolved. So if they're going to boot. So if you're going to be booting, you've got to do the same registration as the tower. I'm kind of using those synonymously. But if you're going to boot, then you have to place an orange blaze on the windshield or on the driver's side window so people know it's there and they don't get in their car and try and move it, because it could, cause damage to their vehicle if they did. You have to allow persons to retrieve their personal property from the car, so if it got towed and they don't have the money to get it out that night, but they can go and get their purse or whatever it is out of the car. This one I've seen go different ways, but we're proposing that if the car owner returns before the vehicle is towed or booted, then they can require the payment of a release fee. They must be able to be reached 24/7, and if there's no answer, call back within 15 minutes. That may be a little bit too short. All of this is totally up to you all, right? These are all just suggestions or things to think about or talk about. And they have to make it available within 30 minutes of the call being answered or the message being left. Okay, so to Councilmember Smith's question, if you are going to tow from private property, and we'll get into what private property is in just a second, but for now, if you're going to tow from private property, or if you're a private property owner who's going to call and have somebody towed, or authorize somebody to be towing from your property, then it's got to be posted, and posted with signs that meet a minimum size requirement, which we haven't finalized that yet. The Chapel Hill ordinance is a minimum of 2 foot by 2 foot, but I'm going to show you some pictures of a sign that are just under that are rectangular, aren't 2 foot by 2 foot, that I think are plenty big, but definitely with contrasting letters and background. Must be prominently posted at each vehicular access to the property and within 25 feet of every parking space. Again, we'll talk about all this in just a second, but the goal is that it's visible and legible from all the parking spaces. So when you park, you can see what the rules are. And then you have to state if it's a tow-away zone, if booting is going to be enforced, what restrictions there are. If this is for customers only, your sign needs to say that. If it's open parking after 6, your sign needs to say that. What are the parking restrictions that are going to cause somebody to get towed if they violate them? The towing company and their phone number, the maximum tow fee, booting fee, and release fee. So that people know, once again, if I pull in this parking lot and I get towed, it's going to be, I'm making this up, $300, whereas somewhere else it might be less, so that people know what they're getting into when they pull into that parking lot.
Hold on.
Yes.
But with regard to the fees, we just talked about if they change their schedule, they got to go back and change those signs.
They would have to change the sign.
Okay, so the sign will be controlling.
Correct. So at least
Yeah.
24 hours right now before it's in effect. That's correct.
Yeah, but I mean, if they increase the towing fee from 200 to 225, but the sign says 200, that's the controlling one,
That
is it
should be
not?
the controlling factor.
Yeah.
That's correct. So, and then state the methods of payment accepted. But then this, y'all give me feedback on this, but I feel like that in helping people, knowing what to do if they get towed, and in the name of transparency and stuff, that we come up with a landing page on our city website, what to do if I've been towed. And I call it I've been, Hendersonville.gov/I've been towed, but whatever you want to call it. That basically lets people know what their rights are, what our ordinance protections are in plain English, so they don't have to read the big ordinance to know, and that we would require them to put that website on their sign. Okay, so this is behind West First. I was there eating lunch with my son. I need to take some pictures. So we had a lot of discussion at the parking meeting about what's going to be too onerous on property owners to have to do. And there was concern about, a 2x2 sign every 25 feet. But then when I went and looked, these signs are just under that, and they're at every single space. So people are already doing it. These two are, so the long side of these is just under 3 feet, and the top side is just under 2 feet. So that's a pretty good sized sign that they're putting at every parking space. So I'm not sure that it is too onerous to have one of these every 25 feet rather than at every spot. They could choose to put it at every spot. But those are the examples. The prop,
Can you go back?
sure,
So clearly, on what we just talked about, those signs are good, but they don't have everything.
correct.
So they're a little, so if we were to pass this ordinance, those folks would have to put up new signs.
Or, Jamie and I have talked a lot about this too, supplement. They could meet the requirement with a
sticker.
small sign under it.
Okay, sure, right, they've got to augment it, yeah,
Right. So for existing signs, they wouldn't have to
right.
replace them, they could just add to. So, and you see the white space, that is, can be changed, you know, they can, so I feel like it's flexible enough if they purchase the right kinds of signs that they should be able to evolve or change if they need to with the requirements. But yes, this one doesn't have the tow. The one on the right is pretty good. It's pretty good. Doesn't have the towing company, the phone number, or the rates, or the www, I've been towed.
Get my car back.
So, so then the requirement for the property owners is that they have to have this posted if they want to tow. If you're not going to tow, it doesn't matter, right? This is to protect involuntary towing practices. So the question is, what private property? And this is where I need some direction from you all. What private property does this apply to? Well, there are some exemptions in the draft ordinance. For instance, if a car has been left more than 24 hours, it doesn't matter if it's posted or not. The private property owner can tow. I don't think that this would be, so if they're blocking an access or an ingress or egress, they can be towed regardless of whether there's a notice or not. Chapel Hill's ordinance basically says, what does it say? Private property. The carry says a parking lot, a private parking lot, regardless of whether it's used for residential or commercial. So I don't think we want a single-family residential residents to have to post in order to tow if somebody parks in their yard, right, obviously. But we're mainly focusing on the businesses. So is it just a parking lot, or is it just designated parking spaces? So if you have designated parking spaces on your property, then that's basically an invitation for somebody to park there, then you have to post before you can tow. And I feel like that's where I'm landing as I've thought about it and discussed it, regardless whether it's residential or commercial.
Say it again.
So if you have created a parking space,
Like with lines, the stop.
or with a stub, you know, you've created a parking space, or it's an obvious, right? If you've got a designated parking space and you want to tow from that parking space, it's got to be posted.
Yeah, because some people live downtown.
Exactly.
Right, so that is residential, but that still is, they don't want anybody parking their spot.
That's right. And I feel like a lot of those people already have a no parking, private property only sign. They would just need to augment it with the additional before they tow.
I have another question. You mentioned a moment ago something called the release fee.
Yes.
If I walk up and I've not been towed away, but the tow truck is there, do I have to pay, they must offer a release fee to like, hey, let me pay something so I, instead of following you out to the, because I'm sure the tow truck guy's like, hey, I was told to tow this car, I'm gonna tow this car.
Exactly. Yes, yes, and yes. But we can't say what that release fee is. So
But they have to offer one.
they have to offer one.
Okay.
Right.
And that too has to be posted.
Yes. The tow fee, the boot fee, and the release fee. So, all right. Now we get into regulating the lots themselves there, okay? And so this is very new. There's not really been text drafted, but because of some things that I learned, again, from Alexa and Kristen, we might need to take a look at this. So I wanted to first look at some sample lots on town. So this is a city lot, right? Looks pretty nice. It's got a sign, it's got parking spaces that are designated, it's got some landscaping. Azalea, same thing, it's got a sign, it's got parking spaces designated, some landscaping. Dogwood, the same thing. And then we have some of these, what I'm terming pop-up lots that are now charging for parking. That's at 404 South Main. This is at Canoga Bend, and I want to look at the
That one
sign.
kills me. It kills me every time I drive by that sign.
Okay, right? How do you know that's not a city sign, except it doesn't have an H on it? I think that's a little deceptive, because it's identical to our sign, except an H, right? But you can see there are some spots designated, but Kristen sent me other pictures that there's plenty of areas in this that people could just park all over the place, right? And so to avoid that breach of the peace where somebody's blocked somebody else in or whatever, I feel like from a public health and safety standpoint, we might want to require parking spots actually be designated and that drive aisles be wide enough to be able to pass. Here's another one. Where do you park on that lot when you pull in there? The first person that gets there is going to set the stage for how everybody else is going to park?
But that wasn't a city lot you just referred to.
No. These are some of the private lots. And I
Well, I
was
mean, if they're not
comparing
to-
and contrasting
But
to
if they're
our
not
lots.
towing anybody, why do we concern ourselves with that?
Well, so what I'm calling a commercial lot is a lot that's allowing the general public to park for a fee.
Oh,
And they are.
okay. Oh, that one is?
Yes. That's my point.
Okay. I know that one. I was just looking for a
Same
sign.
for that one.
Right, no, I got you. That last one you had, I didn't realize there was a fee charged for that.
Oh, yes. So this is Google Earth. So the sign isn't up yet, right? But there is actually a Park Mobile sign out there. But there's like, one or two little Park Mobile signs. They can tell you all about it if you've got questions of how much notice is out there. People have no idea. Some have an hourly rate, some don't. No towing, towing might say it's this big, it's all over the place. So to protect the public and for transparency, that's why we need consistency, some rules to bring about consistency. So when people know, they know whether it's a city lot or a private lot, right? All right. So I propose, and I've cleared this with Lou, that they come up with that we regulate this commercial use like any other commercial use. We regulate every commercial use in the city through zoning and through standards. And so I'm not talking about grandiose standards, just some minimum public health, safety, welfare standards that would be put into place that everybody would have to abide by. And I would recommend that everybody even the pre-existing people have to come into compliance within a certain period of time. Because otherwise, I don't know, So anyway, but like parking space size, so that there's enough room for people to park, that they know where to park, the drive aisles are wide enough. And then landscaping, that's up to you all, but we do, so if I have an accessory parking lot for a regulated space, there are landscaping requirements. So I don't know if you want to require it if that's the primary use or not. Those are all considerations for you all. We're not this isn't going to happen today, right? This is things to be thinking about. But the operational aspects, I do think we need to go ahead and put some into place. That again, it's got to be signed as private, paid lot, or other similar language. It must be clearly distinguishable from parking lots operated by the city, so that people know that's not a city lot, because otherwise we get calls because people think that we've ticketed them or so, and people need to know that we want our parking program to be successful and not get dinged for something somebody else has done. So, they have to also have a fee schedule and post their parking rates. And then they are giving citations, private parking citations. I know, right?
How do you do that?
How do you do that?
I'm not going to tell them that whether they can or can't do it because there's no case law on it. I looked. Yes.
So a friend of mine sent me a picture of his parking ticket from across, from Dry Falls the other day. And he was upset what the heck is the city doing, giving me tickets, you know, all the way over here? And I was like, oh, that's not us. And I made sure to let him know who owned the property so that he could take that up with them. But so there's like a private company, I guess, that Park Mobile employs? Is this how it works? Is it a contract? So
So there is a company that is managing all these lots.
J&S or something, I think? That's you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, yes, so they are an independent contractor, I guess? Who is,
working with Park Mobile for 10 years, actually.
okay, cool.
I mean, just like similar to what you guys did. But, I mean, there's no legal, you can't give somebody a citation and legally enforce that.
Actually, we can.
I'm talking to this lady right here, sir.
So I am not attempting to say if it's legal or not. I'm just saying if you're going to do it, it needs to be separate and apart from ours. So this is one, so without, I took the names off, but can you tell me which is ours and which is theirs?
Ooh,
Oh,
wow. So those are two different,
One is theirs and one is ours.
this is the same company that we're paying to run our parking?
No,
Oh, okay, different.
no. They use Park Mobile to accept payment, but they are contracting, my understanding is with the private property owners to manage it for them. So if they're going to have a surcharge, I'm calling it a surcharge, I feel like we should say that they can't use the word ticket, citation, penalty, or fine, because those are all words we as the government use. And if people see those words, it creates an impression that it has been issued by the city. That they can't use coercive tactics to collect payment by having, for instance, misleading or coercive language on the invoice. I think they're calling them a notice, which okay, we don't use notice. But they would have to post how to pay, post methods of payment accepted, accept at least 2 major credit cards, and post the owner or operator of the lot and phone number and be available during normal business hours. So those are the operating requirements that I'm proposing.
Based upon what Councilmember Hensley just showed me, it seems like the little piece of paper should say on it, privately issued or something.
Absolutely.
Like, because other than at the very top where it says LNC or whatever it says, you wouldn't know.
Right. So I can tell you that in California, usually California is just way out there and left. In California, they wouldn't be able to do this. Right, the Attorney General of California issued an opinion basically saying this was not permitted, that only a government can do a ticket, that there's a tenet in contract law about not being able to penalize people for breaching the contract. But I'm not here to tell them whether or not they can do that. That's not my role, right? Would have to be between the private parties to challenge that. But I do think we can say it can't be deceptively similar to ours.
Certainly not the same color.
Well, and so we are talking about changing our color, right?
We're getting rid of the color on ours. Theirs will be blank with the words on once it's printed. So ours won't have color anymore on them.
Okay. But if you look at this one, it's hard to read because it's so small, but they do use the word notice, but they also say fine and penalty, and then on the back. So the one on the left is ours, the one on the right is theirs. I will say, I don't think they can withhold your next vehicle registration if you don't pay it. And so that's what I mean about using coercive tactics. I don't think that's fair to tell somebody that if you can't.
So this
They
one,
may want to talk about taking that off
the
off
one
of
on the
theirs.
right then is basically you are parking in a private lot that uses Park Mobile or somebody like that, and you're parking longer than what you paid for.
or didn't pay.
Or you didn't pay at all. That's the same thing, like you didn't pay and you're parking there. And they are going around issuing citations.
That's right,
Yeah.
right. And so, I don't know if I put it in here or not, but Surcharge, so in their rates and fees, that's something they would need to post, that for overtime or unpaid, see, in number 3, the third bullet, if there are surcharges for unpaid parking or overtime parking, that has to be posted and what it is, so people know. Again, people know what they are getting into when they park there, what they, is the contract, I guess, between them and the parking lot if they pull in there, and they need to know what the terms of that contract are.
You're paying for being a trespasser.
Right. You're paying, so you're not a
I would really like to know if
trespasser.
that's legal.
So we can ask for, if we can ask for legislation on that point, or we could ask for an attorney general's opinion on that point. But I'm not prepared to say, without some maybe closed session discussion kind of things, saying much more than that beyond what I've already said.
Oh, and yeah, I'm not asking you to, I'm just saying that that's the legal question. Can you
It is the legal
make
question.
someone pay for being a trespasser?
Right, and so somebody would have to challenge that and have a court rule on that.
That guy probably wants to do that.
So, okay, last, civil penalties. So these are pretty stiff, but we can do that. And, to help encourage people to abide by the rules, I'm recommending pretty high civil penalties for violations of the ordinance. And that's any violations of the ordinance, right?
Whether you're a towing company or you're the private landowner.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Or a commercial park operator or owner. This would apply. And we have discretion of whether to issue it, right? It's not like these ladies will be enforcing this. And so they can talk to people and have discretion of whether to issue the civil penalty, but it's $300 for a first offense, $600 if for a second offense if it's in a 12-month period, and $1,200 for the third or subsequent offense in a 12-month period.
So in other words, if you got a misleading citation and they or someone at the HPD felt like that citation was a violation of what we may pass, then that company who issued that citation then owes that offense.
Correct. Now, that's got to be worked out, right, the language. But yes, or they towed without it being properly posted.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Or they didn't let somebody pay in by credit card, and so in that I've been towed page, it would have here's complaint form. Here's how you fill out your complaint form, or if you feel like you've been, that kind of thing. That's it.
another job.
Any questions or comments? Okay, as far as time frame goes, how quickly do you want this to come back to you? Because there's no public hearing required for this. How quickly do you want this to come back to you in the form of an ordinance for a vote?
1 month.
Stop.
Yeah,
No.
not in July, but the
No.
August meeting.
I don't think we can do it that quickly. And they've got to have notice.
So we would thank you, great point. I think that they do have to have time to come into compliance. So just because it's effective, you would have a date that everybody has to come into
Yeah.
compliance.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yes, so that's what I need some direction on.
I think an ordinance, the sooner the better is acceptable. That's my opinion.
And then we
And
can,
obviously, the grace period could be 6 months or whatever to come into compliance. I'm just throwing a number out, but I think the sooner that we have some sort of policy in place, the better we can protect our residents and visitors.
I would agree. I would just, the part about the misleading citations, to me, there is no grace period on that one. That needs to change immediately, because it looks just like the ones we're writing. But we can debate the grace period part later, yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
All right. Something other than parking, all right.
Okay. Next, animals. Amendments to Chapter 10.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council. As you mentioned, the right paper in front of me. Tonight we have for you a presentation on a pretty big revision to Chapter 10 of the City Code, which is the chapter dealing with the regulation of animals. So a couple of words on our current ordinance. The last major revision, there you go. The last major revision was in February of 2020, and that coincided with the city's enforcement of animal services. Previously, it was at least partially enforced by Henderson County. That ordinance revision created the Animal Services Advisory Committee, and the ordinance was based heavily on the Henderson County ordinance because I don't think we knew exactly, we didn't have any experience enforcing it in the city, weren't sure what we should do. So, of course, we went with what had already been enforced for a long time. Since then, we've had some experience with it. So, for instance, we've been through the process of declaring dangerous dogs. The Animal Services Advisory Committee has had 2 appeals on that and a lot of experience through that process. We have a civil animal services officer enforcing our ordinance now. We've discovered some state law that makes enforcement of certain provisions of our ordinance difficult. And some of it applies, differently in the city than it would in a county. And then we've got, experience enforcing it that, there's some interpretation that's having to be made, that sort of thing. And then civil penalties are one base level, and it doesn't account for every situation. So we've got a new civil penalty schedule proposed too. Spay and neuter your pets. Really great, Bob Barker. There's some things in here that the Animal Services Advisory Committee has discussed. These are not in the proposed ordinance. So these are things that they think would maybe, I won't go so far as to call them controversial, but would be a big change to what we're doing now. And so they kind of require their own attention. And so just FYI, there's no huge bombs in this ordinance. But those are the kind of things that have been discussed. So I've kind of broken it out into a couple of slides here as to what we're keeping, what we're revising, what we're deleting, and what's new. And if it's all right with the city council, we can just kind of do this oral argument style. I'll just start and you stop me when you have questions. So the stuff that's going to remain, it's almost verbatim. As in the current ordinance, it's just moved around a bit. We've got the protection of birds. The city's a bird sanctuary. Same for squirrels. Fouling public grounds. That's your dog pooping in public. You got to pick it up. Except for it's clear that it includes all animals now. The restraint of animals, that's tethering, is unchanged. Swine, there's a provision that you can have a miniature pig. There is some concern in the Animal Services Advisory Committee that that species of animal doesn't exist, that all pigs are bigger than that if properly cared for. There is a general statute, as I mentioned, state law preemption, that I just want to mention that says that cities cannot regulate the standard of care for farm animals. And standard of care means construction, repair, or improvement of shelter or housing. It means restrictions on the type of feed or medicines, and it means exercise and social interaction requirements. And farm animals, it has a list of what a farm animal is, and that includes swine. So this is already in our ordinance. We're not changing it, but we've got some stuff in there, for instance, on adequate shelter that would not be enforceable as to swine or other livestock. There's the section on the disposal of dead poultry. It did say fowl. We changed it to poultry to align with state law. And then destruction of animals that can't be seized or confined. That's when the animal services officer has to put a dog down in the field that's, they can't control. Some sections we're proposing to revise. Running at large, made it clear that that applies to all animals and that a dangerous dog running at large is going to be a misdemeanor. So there's a criminal penalty in here.
Does running at large mean no leash?
Yeah, off of the property of the owner with no leash.
Okay.
Yeah. keeping of other farm animals. Previously, it said milking cows, milking goats, and horses, and there was a lot of interpretation there because there was another section that just said all livestock has to be kept in accordance with the chapter. So sort of unclear what livestock you could keep. We've got that changed now to where it just says other farm animals, and they can be kept within 150 feet of the owner's residence. Previously, it was 150 feet of any residence. They had to be that far away from any residence. Now it's the owner's residence. They can be within that buffer. There's some more on farm animals coming. Keeping of poultry, we've capped that at 20 birds, and going back to the preemption on standards of care for farm animals, it mentions poultry flocks greater than 20 birds. We couldn't regulate the standard of care, so that's the logic there, is we can regulate their shelter and that sort of thing if we cap it at 20 birds. Requirement for poultry enclosures, there was some stuff in there about whitewashing it annually, lining it every season, that sort of thing. We've deleted all of that as specific to poultry enclosure and just specify that adequate shelter has to be provided. And we've got that defined. So definitions, the definitions were scattered around. Most of them were in the dogs article or are. Added a lot of definitions and put them in their own section at the beginning of the chapter. On dangerous dogs, the current ordinance tracks the state law, which has a mostly in-name only distinction between potentially dangerous dogs and dangerous dogs, and that was confusing to a lot of people. So we've removed potentially dangerous and just called them dangerous. We've changed how people who own these dogs can be served with the order. That's also based on some experience we had trying to enforce this. There's an insurance requirement in there for if you're going to keep a dangerous dog, you have to meet certain requirements. Those are all the same, except that we're adding, you're going to have to maintain liability insurance. And then you have to post a sign. And another thing our animal services officer mentioned was it's kind of hard to know at a glance if you have a sign that's, and there's some interpretation of whether or not it meets the ordinance. It's much easier if the city provides the sign and she knows what to look for. Yes.
Are any of these dangerous dogs dangerous just by their breed, or is these animals that have exhibited behavior that makes them dangerous? Yeah. It's and it tracks state law. This is pretty much statewide. We're not doing anything very out of the ordinary there. A dangerous dog is a dog that, without provocation, has killed or inflicted serious injury on a person, or is determined to have inflicted a bite that resulted in broken bones or disfiguring lacerations, or killed a domestic animal when not on the owner's real property, or has approached a person when not on the owner's property in a vicious or terrorizing manner in an apparent attitude of attack. So it has, basically, when it's happened in the past. Done something.
Yeah, when it's happened in the past, the dog has bit somebody and caused some serious injury, yeah. Rabies vaccination, so clarify that cats have to have that as well. Rabies is largely enforced at the state level. They're in the public health statutes, is pretty well set out, and the public health director has a lot to do with it. People look to our ordinance to know what to do, and so we just wanted to make it clear that state law requires cats be vaccinated. And then we have the enforcement procedure, what our animal services officer is going to do if she finds your animal's not vaccinated or suspects that it might have rabies, that sort of thing. And then if an animal bites somebody, it has to be reported, and we've got that. Again, that's in the state statutes, but kind of outlined what happens if an animal bites somebody. On mistreatment of animals, we've clarified by adding some definition to what adequate shelter means. So that should be in your proposed ordinance. I'm glad to go through that if you want, or we can come back to it. The things we will not be keeping: fowl running at large, poultry is in the general at large requirement. We do have poultry running at large from time to time. The section named compliance with article, basically it said you can only keep livestock in compliance with this chapter, and it didn't really help us a whole lot. Now we've got a specific prohibition in there, so I'm just going to read that to you. Here's one of the changes. It shall be unlawful for any person to keep or maintain any oxen, bison, roosters, or wolf hybrids within the city. That's what's been proposed at this point.
No roosters?
That's what's been proposed by the Animal Services Advisory Committee at this point.
Because there are definitely roosters in the city limits.
I hear them
Oh, yeah.
every morning, I hear these.
Oh, yeah. There are definitely roosters in the city limits.
Yeah, there definitely are. That would be a change. Yeah, chickens are still okay. Roosters would be the one that would be affected by this.
Across the street from me.
If we want to talk about roosters now, I'd be glad to let.
Would you let me say something, since I'm the chair of the Animal Advisory Board, about the chicken? No? Yes?
I don't think she heard your question.
Oh, I'm just curious.
She wanted to know if she could make a comment
Oh,
about the
yeah.
chickens.
Yes.
Yes.
I just.
Come
since
to
there's
the
no public
microphone,
comment, I'm
please.
Technically public, but no, you're fine.
Co-presenter, please.
No,
Prison.
you have to keep doing the presentation.
Your
after I
name
say
is
this.
on.
Chickens and roosters, two different things. There, right now is nothing about roosters. I know there are some roosters in the city, but a lot of the population believes that roosters are not allowed in the city currently. And we went back and forth over the rooster thing
I
a
don't,
lot.
I personally don't have a problem with that, because,
With the roosters?
no, with us
the roosters.
outlawing roosters.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
They're
we
loud.
had talked about including or letting noise ordinance take care of that as well as barking dogs, but then somebody got ahead of us and changed the noise ordinance before we got done with this, so then we had to address noisy animals in this. Roosters are included, so that would be Chief My Hand. Thank you, Chief. We keep going? Okay.
Is that, you guys want to keep discussing roosters, or I'm
Yeah.
fine to keep going?
Yeah, you could talk about it for like 6 hours. We did.
So what about chickens?
Chickens,
Chickens are fine. Chickens and roosters separate. So, I mean, they're,
Okay.
yes, roosters are a male, unaltered, unneutered chicken.
for chickens, we keep that would be under poultry, and you can have up to 20 birds. 21 birds. Oh,
Got that many or more, so.
Yeah.
Anyway.
and again, that rationale is to make sure that we can keep regulating their welfare, so. Let's see. Location restrictions.
The chickens always get us on
Okay, yeah, the location restrictions being, that was the provision that said livestock can't be kept within 150 feet of a residence. We've just moved that and specified that it can be within 150 feet of the owner's residence. As written right now, it doesn't say that, so. There's a section on the maintenance of horse stables, that's preempted. We cannot regulate the shelter of horses. For running at large, there was a dog-specific one that we've combined with the general at-large prohibition. There's a section on mischievous dogs that wasn't very well defined and hadn't been used. We've replaced that with a section on public nuisance animals. That's kind of a step below. Your dog is continually at large, or it's, let's see, what else is a public nuisance animal? Yeah, smelly. Causes unsanitary condition of enclosures or surroundings. Something that's like,
What would an example of that be?
I think an example of that would be, and then there's damages the property of anyone other than its owner. So if it gets out and starts, the neighbor dog down the street keeps getting it, tearing up your trash cans. And it's been an enforcement kind of difficulty for Alexis. We've got this public nuisance.
And I assume if the owner's not taking care of the pen in which the animal is kept, then it's directly adjacent to,
That's the smelly part.
yeah, an owner's.
Yeah, yes, yeah, sorry about that. Okay, yeah, your question was specifically to the smelliness of it. And that's going to be civil penalties and potentially impoundment, where that's not going to authorize us to euthanize the animal. It's not intended to be that sort of regulation. And then some new proposed sections. There's some sections on establishing, who the animal services officer is and what their authority is. Mentioned that the Animal Services Advisory Committee exists and reviews dangerous dog appeals. We got the prohibition on, I mentioned, keeping oxen, bison, roosters, and wolf hybrids. But see, of course, we can't regulate their standard of care. A wolf hybrid is not a farm animal, so that wouldn't be in there, but oxen, bison, and roosters are. Giveaways in public spaces, there's a proposed prohibition on like giving away an animal like as a prize. That's sort of, that's been proposed. It's not in our ordinance currently. We've got a section on excessive noises because that's been removed from the noise ordinance. It largely tracks what was in the noise ordinance. It's basically an animal that makes noises continuously or intermittently for a half hour. So if your dog's barking for a half hour, that's when Alexis would potentially respond to that. Some stuff on if you abandon your animal, the procedure on what the animal services officer has to do to try to locate you and then potentially impound the animal if the owner can't be located. On the transport of animals, there's a section proposed that says animals in an open truck bed have to be secured by a tether unless you meet an exception. So if it's a law enforcement animal, if it's a search and rescue animal, if it's a hunting dog, or if it's a farm dog, those would be the exceptions. There's a section proposed on a prohibition of confinement of animals in motor vehicles, and then it authorizes the animal services officer to enter the vehicle and impound the animal if there's a safety concern. There's also that authorization is in the criminal law statutes, but that process is laid out in this proposed ordinance as well. A prohibition on using animals in entertainment shows and for exhibition, and then that's, I just put that quote in there to know exactly what that means. It says, animal exhibiting an unnatural behavior which the animal is wrestled, fought, harassed, or displayed in such a way that the animal is abused or stressed. That would not be permitted. And then I mentioned the public nuisance animals prohibition. One thing I didn't put any slides on, which I wish I did, is the new civil penalty schedule I mentioned. It's in the ordinance. I'm sure we can pull that up on the screen. Right now, there's just one blanket civil penalty for everything. But there's been a hierarchy proposed. So based on the severity of the offense, it's at the very end of the proposed ordinance. Thank you, whoever's scrolling for me. Page 16. So it's broken down into the severity of the offense and then for repeat violations, similar to how it was done in the parking ordinance. If you reoffend within a 12-month period, if you scroll up just a little bit. So you can kind of see where it's broken down into the different severity. So if you harm a bird in violation of city code, that's a level 2 violation. That subjects you to the level 2 penalty, where the first violation is $100, second violation in a 12-month period is $150, and so on. That gives a little more room for Alexis to work with versus either trying to charge somebody criminally or assessing a $500 civil penalty blanket when a lot of the things she's responding to is just not really appropriate, a chicken at large. She wants to give you a violation. Hey, stop doing it. $50, that sort of thing.
What if it's repeated, though?
Yeah, that's where we would step up. It gets up to the fourth and any additional violation is $200 per. And then we still have the right to, it's in our code, and have the right to, if it's a violation of state law, a crime, we would, refer that to the district attorney, or we could file an action to enjoin you from doing that behavior, get a judgment.
Okay.
Get jailed in contempt. Those
I
are
was
just
just
like,
thinking sometimes the fee or the penalty, some people just won't pay them, and so then what happens to them?
yeah, well, if they owe civil penalties that they're not paying, that would be up to us to try to collect them. It's a debt. We take them to small claims usually, and try to recover it as a debt. So, I mean, ordinance enforcement's, it's tedious and sometimes tricky, but.
I think the fine's good. I think we've also know that, based on the court system on the criminal side as it relates to the workload, it's very hard for the DA staff to stop and take a case, and we found like the civil penalties, the better way to do it as it relates to what's the workload in the court system.
And just really briefly on civil penalties generally, if we've assessed civil penalties, they aren't being paid, the common way to deal with that is to file an action in small claims for basically money owed. You owe me $1,000 in civil penalties you haven't paid. Get a judgment. Then maybe it's, if they own property in the county, it could be a lien on their property, or we could just try to collect it as a judgment.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing that did change on a state level through this process is the civil versus criminal penalty. So that's another reason that we landed here. That was kind of, it actually helped us instead of making it more complicated.
Questions?
Can you talk a little bit about, there's a large group of people in the city who want tethering laws. And can you talk a little bit about why that is not on here, or what steps you're doing, or are you further evaluating it, or you're not evaluating it, or anything like that?
There are some regulations on tethering in our current ordinance, and they are unchanged.
Well, we did tweak them a little bit, I think. They're mostly unchanged. What we did change were some of the specifics of just keeping animal in general. We have seen dogs everywhere that have just as bad of lives if they're in a fence outside 24/7 as they are on a chain. We also did not want to take away, because it's very hard to limit time, as we've talked about this before. We did not want to hinder a person who puts their dog out on a tether first thing in the morning while they're having their coffee. We didn't want to have to remove an animal from a home when the family is at work and school all day, and their last option from the animal continuously escaping off the property is to be tethered for some hours in the shade. But the specifics of allowance on that and just keeping in general are what we decided to expand on and make more precise and specific. So that's the sheltering. We even have it can't be drafty, it can't be wet, in great detail there. And then the definition section is much larger than it was and not scattered throughout. So where it was gray area meaning to some things, we now have a lot more tighter guidelines on how people should keep them.
So instead of addressing the actual tethering, you're addressing the conditions with which they're
Correct.
staying? Okay.
Yes, yes. And I mean, for example, we did have an instance, this was before Alexis came on, that it was a dog that kept escaping repeatedly. They had a fence. They kept it inside, and when they weren't home during the day, when it was in the fence, it just would not stay on the fence. It was climbing, a 12-foot fence. And other than a huge expense of putting a top on it, the animal control officer at the time said, just put it on a tether, per the parameters in the ordinance, and that family was able to keep their animal because of that. So this is in part keeping animals out of shelters, but also keeping the animal in the home is really important. We don't want to see animals in poor conditions at all, but again, Blue Ridge Humane has built fences for animals that are still kept just as poorly, whether they're on a chain or not on a chain. And there are, he said that there are things that are not in here. Those are intentionally left out. They need more discussion. We went over this very thoroughly a lot of times, and we just decided it's nothing that was in there before, but there's some kind of hot topic discussions and larger discussions in animal welfare in general, some state or federal kind of things that we need to figure out how to deal with them. But we just wanted to put something in front of you that was approachable and that allowed Alexis to do her job the best she could, with experience working at both the animal shelter and as our city animal control officer. So her input has been great. So a lot of this is experience-based, and it's just cleaner. There was some weird things in there that were very old. And I wanted to thank Daniel and Alexis and Angela for their time on this. Angela spent a lot of time doing this. I kind of held the strings, but these guys put a lot of work in, so thank you.
I quite literally get paid to do it.
I don't, but I'm glad you
Yeah.
do. And any more questions, just.
Anything else?
No.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank
letting
you
us
for all
do
the
this.
work.
I was surprised when I got the nod to attempt a complete revision instead of just amendments to this ordinance. So it is basically brand new. Read it thoroughly.
So at this point, there are some criminal penalties specified, so as you know, it'll require 2 votes to become effective. So we just need some direction from council. If there's other things that you want discussed in more detail, we can bring it back with some revisions or put it on the agenda to discuss those particular things in more detail, or we can bring it to you for a vote, or however you want to deal with that.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't read the whole thing yet.
Understood?
Yeah.
I like to
I
vote.
know, sorry.
Bring it to us for a vote.
Great. Okay, we will do that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Edwards Park update.
Let's do something fun, Brian.
Yay, putt-putt.
Please don't stop for me. I just want to run to the bathroom really quick.
Good. Yeah, I
Scout
don't,
hut is right next to it, and I've been watching all the work over there.
I don't have any stand-up included in my presentation, so, but we'll just try to keep it positive. So, just want to give an update on Edwards Park tonight. Just real quickly, really, I'm gonna run through pictures just to give you all a heads up of where we are and where we're headed. So the mini golf contractor has completed all of the concrete pours for the mini golf. The building construction is ongoing. The art installation is starting to mobilize, and playground equipment is to be installed soon in September, I believe. Next steps really are, you're gonna see a lot of landscaping occurring on site. Once landscaping completes the interior of the holes, the mini golf contractor will be back out to finish carpeting the holes. And then they will be completely done and turned over from a contract perspective. Playground and signage installation will begin. Building construction is continuing. The next steps really in that area are putting the roof on the building and then roughing in the inside of the building. And we're really aiming for an October opening, a few weekends in October, and potentially like a special holiday event or something. So that's what we're looking for this year, but we're really pushing the contractor to get this thing done and finalized. So just want to give you some shots of what's been going on out there. So this is the concrete pours from Harris Miniature Golf. So that's, I think that's like a hole 5 or 6. You're looking at the VFW on the left, the new concessions building straight ahead with North Main Street, and the rest of the course would be off to the right. Here you can see one of the water feature holes. This is the bridge that you would cross. There's a waterfall to the left, which I think we'll see in another picture, but this is looking back up towards the VFW. Here you can see Ross Henderson next to the waterfall. So the waterfall is really cool when it's turned on. I was very impressed with the work they did. That is hole 8, I believe. And here's some shots from the left is really kind of the top of the site near the Boy Scout huts. We're going to have special musical stepping stones in the concrete there. And off on the right is kind of towards the bottom of the site near the triangle. The squirrel will actually be placed, spoiler alert, on that little concrete pad there. So.
Oh, the squirrel.
Again, just an idea of what the building is going to look like when complete. Again, we have playground equipment going in. There'll be additional shades and benches in addition to what you're seeing here, and it is a grass turf surface. And really just want to thank the community. They're really hard at work on this, so just want to share some pictures of what they're doing. This is probably like the best part of the whole project. So you can see the Apple Country Woodcrafters on the right constructing one of the Apple features. That's the old church. It's been completely rehabbed by Public Works and painted by one of our local artists. So that's going to be out on the course as well. This is our probably pride and joy. This is our Laura Corn Bear. It's really awesome, has a lot of good mementos to her, and the best quote we had from her in her notebook. So that's going to be out in the park. Sneak peek at some of the Hendersonville 9th Avenue High School Tiger, which will be out there on the course, and then the Carl Sandburg Goat will be out on the course as well. Some of our new features. And really, that's all I've got tonight. I just wanted to give you all an update of where we were, and really, we're pushing hard to get this all done. I think what you'll see in the next few months when we get to August, September, will be just like all playground and features getting installed. So any questions about the project?
I'm so very excited.
Will we get to play on it in
Yes.
2023?
Yes, the goal is we'll have some weekends in October in the fall where we're open, and maybe a special like holiday event is what we're thinking through.
I would anticipate that since it's going to be so nice, that attendance to it is going to be much larger than in years past.
An interesting concept.
I'm just saying, because like the price point's real good, so I just want to make
It
sure
is an excellent price point.
we will be
We do not intend to
prepared.
change that.
That'll become part of
We will
Scott.
not touch that price.
Yeah, because it was not as an attractive putt-putt as it will be now.
This will be
It's
very nice for the
challenging,
public.
but I think this will attract people more.
Excellent points.
All right.
My putter's in the trunk, so I'm ready when everybody else is ready.
Be out there.
I don't know, are we going to allow private putters in there? Or do you have to use the ones that,
I believe that question was posted on Facebook actually already. And,
You roll in with your own putter?
I've been
Oh,
avoiding.
yeah, girl.
that's what she said.
Oh, yeah, I take my own putter. We
How would you
played
possibly enforce
216.
I don't know.
I think we would need Daniel to do
Yes.
a presentation on the enforcement and regulation.
Exactly.
Like, is it like a
Putters.
Titleist or just like a regular?
So to be truthful, it's Tony's old putter. He got a new one, so I got the hand-me-down. But you play a lot better when you have a real putter. Stop making fun of me, y'all.
I think that's the part of putt-putt, is that you don't have great
Listen, when I crush y'all at the
And you're like
putt-putt, you won't be
3
laughing
feet
about it.
taller than the putter.
I'll take that challenge. You want to
Okay.
go to the new course?
All right. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it. Okay, Jerry.
The Parks and Green Space Master Plan would like to know if recreation programming is something the city council is interested in having as part of that plan. I told them for the Jer Bear, no, but I'm only one of 5. So I'm asking you guys,
I'm also a negative.
I'm also a negative.
yeah, that's fine. I'm gonna pass that along because they were talking about like, we can do things the county doesn't do. And I'm like, let's pull back on them reins a little bit. So I will pass that along to them that they should just look at facilities. Gotcha.
If, I'd be willing to listen to some things, but not a big recreation program. Now, if there were certain things that they might suggest, like a kids triathlon, sponsoring something like that, or a.
Events?
Yeah, some kind of events. but
Okay,
I don't know about
I
ongoing.
can appreciate that. Okay. Gotcha.
Activities.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
All right, I'll pass that along to the group.
Okay.
Can I ask one question about that as it relates to I was at the managers conference, and one of the things that we talked about was demographics and the aging population. Is there any conversation, I know that there's been a couple of conversations with the Council on Aging. Is there anything related to senior citizens that, being that we have the Bridge Club and the shuffleboard courts and those kind of things at Whitmire, is there anything conversation we have associated with recreation is particularly related to senior citizens? I don't know if that's an area that, based on our demographic, we should consider, so.
You mean us running the programs?
Or in some partnership or something related to, just a question, I don't know, since we are a retirement community, or a large number of retirees here, just food for thought, so.
Think about it, let me know. We meet again in August or September.
Okay. Anything else anyone thought of in the meantime? If not, we are adjourned.